Amy is gonna explain the drivers.
Thank you, Justino. So as Justino mentioned, in this project, we looked at some of the incentive structures and pressures that are put on these four main stakeholder groups in this industry, which were the companies, the factories where these garments are supplied, the governments where the factories are located, and factory employees. So the first group we looked at were the multinational companies. These companies are going to include brands like Levi's, Gap, H&M, Zara, which is owned by Inditex, all of these brands that we know and love. The first group that really influences their actions are the consumers. And although consumers have the possibility to really influence these companies in terms of being more proactive in terms of social responsibility, our research showed that many times in questionnaires, they'll say that they're willing to spend more on ethically sourced clothing. However, market research by companies shows that their purchasing practices don't reflect those statements, and that what they're really looking for in terms of clothing are new styles at really low prices. The next group we have are the investors, which also really influence the decisions made by multinationals. And what they're looking for is a return on their investment. They're looking for growth, profit, and really getting their money back and making it a return on that investment. We did an interview with an investment advisor, and he told us that they have all these different tools and indicators to explain the performance of a company, whether or not to invest, and none of those tools include social responsibility indicators, which shows that for them, it really isn't a big issue in terms of looking at the success of a company. So with these two pressures and some other ones, we came to the conclusion that what really drives these companies are the idea to maximize profit and to maintain economic growth. And as you can see, this list is not including social responsibility because their main pressure groups are not asking or showing that that is an important issue for them. So with these drivers, what companies really need to make sure happens in their supply chain is that it is constant, efficient, and timely. There is one group that does try to pressure multinationals to improve their social responsibility, which are NGOs, activist groups, nonprofits. However, most academics agree that the only time they've really been efficient at getting these companies to change is when they've really affected the marketplace and they've got consumers or investors or some other group behind it. But alone, they really haven't been that efficient in getting some change in multinationals' behavior. The next group we looked at were the suppliers. So these are the factories that are producing the products. And as you would expect, the biggest group that puts pressure on them are the multinationals. However, the pressure comes in two separate dialogues. The first dialogue comes from the procurement department. And the procurement department is the department that actually places the orders in the factories. And what they're looking for is the highest quality product at the lowest price in the quickest amount of time. The other dialogue, the other pressure comes from the corporate responsibility department, which of course is looking to improve health and safety and to improve labor conditions, which is going to include increasing wages and decreasing hours worked. So as you can see, these two groups are sending different messages, one asking for lower costs and one asking to raise wages, and it really isn't showing the suppliers a consistent message from the companies. And in fact, a lot of times the procurement department keeps short-term contracts with these suppliers and they have really low margins, which really doesn't give them an incentive to actually embrace what the corporate responsibility department is asking for. So it's really a big problem for suppliers to try to deal with these two mixed messages. The next group we looked at were the governments. And again, these are governments in the countries where the factories are located. And we were asking ourselves, why are they not playing a bigger role in trying to improve labor conditions within their country? And our research showed us that it kind of all started more or less when globalization began to take hold. And as that happened, and these companies started to move their supply chains all across the world, they did it at such a fast pace that a lot of times these governments had a hard time keeping up in terms of implementing legislation and enforcement. So this created what many people call a governance gap, in which implementation of legislation or actually creating legislation was either weak or non-existent, which left the employees and the environment oftentimes unprotected from the multinationals and the suppliers. So as these groups are looking for economic benefit and profit, oftentimes that comes at the expense of employees in the environment. These companies, the multinationals, did try to fill this gap slightly with codes of conduct and auditing systems. However, our research showed that most people agree that these have been rather ineffective in covering these labor conditions and this gap. In areas where the governments have tried to create legislation, they've hit a couple roadblocks. Some of the ones that are included are corruption in their country or conflicts of interest within politics. So sometimes their factory owners may be part, or maybe also a politician, which creates a conflict of interest. The other one is lobby groups and factory owners themselves trying to keep regulation weak. So those are some issues that they've had to try to really get the implementation of legislation on this issue. And the last group we looked at were the employees. And as you probably have seen, employees haven't been mentioned yet as an influencer of any of the other three actors. And this is because they're at the bottom of the supply chain. And they have very little influence over really making a change within this industry. And this is mostly due to the fact that because of this complex web of incentives and pressures from the other three actors, a lot of times that pressure gets pushed down onto them and turns into the conditions that we see: long hours, low wages, poor conditions that gets put on the employees. And we asked ourselves what was the incentive of these employees to work in this sector if they had such poor conditions and low wages? And we found that in most of these countries, due to the lack of skill of these workers, this is actually the best alternative in terms of work for them, in terms of income stability, and a lot of times their physical ability to do the work and conditions in the factories.
Okay, good morning. I want to introduce our strategies, the way how we believe that we can introduce improvements inside the sector. The strategy number one is our practical approach. We believe that we can start doing actions regarding with strategy number one that I'm going to introduce later on. The strategy number two is the innovative approach that we also believe that is not possible to do it right now, but we think that is going to be or can be implemented in the next years. And the strategy number three, it's the system change. It's how we think we can change the current condition of the sector in order to improve the conditions. To start talking a little bit about the strategy number one, it's important to say that this strategy was established for us in according how are the current conditions of the industry. And we think that the fact that the four main players of the sector has to be present in strategy number one, for the case of employees and suppliers, they don't have so much influence over the sector. So we have developed 17 proposals that will be addressed for multinationals, for developing countries, and for developed countries in order to improve the condition, as I said before, in the sector. It's important to say that each proposal is addressed to a key issue that we saw in our research. And for a matter of time, I'm not going to explain the 17 proposals. I'm going to explain a few from each player that we have. And for the case of multinationals, I want to start saying that reducing the size of the supply chain is a fact that will allow the multinationals to monitor how the operations are in the supply chain, and also will give benefits for them because they will have the ability to improve the problems or the issues that they will see in the operations. The second idea that I want to explain is the long-term contracts. This is important because right now the industry it seems that is conducted by a short-term vision. It's something that in our research and according with some of our interviews that we perform, this is something that appears in every time that we were discussing with these interviewers and also in the literature. The fact that we can implement these contracts is going to benefit the industry because we can promote a better channel of communication between the factory and the multinational, as well to foster a stronger relationship between them. And the collaboration throughout multi-stakeholder engagement is something that for us is really important too, because we do see that the multinational also can implement these ideas in order to probably share the research, the implementation techniques, as well to co-create solutions in order to give improvements over the sector. For the case of the developing countries, the first that I want to talk is the labor condition, as many of you know. The problems with the labor conditions are more related with salaries and also with the conditions inside the factory, but the fact that for the case of Bangladesh, most of the workers that works in the sector doesn't reach the level of living wage or decent wage to have a proper access for the basic needs. The health and safety is also really important because, as we saw in one of our first slide, the accident that happens in April 24 in Bangladesh, it was like a demonstration that this is an issue that we have to care about. And it's important to say the Bangladesh accident is not something that appears. It has been accidents in the past, but this puts this topic again in the mainstream. And the investment policy is also important too, because some companies are moving not to the fact that they want to produce cheap. They also want to produce in a safe environment with safe conditions and in proper environment, to say in this way. And last, for the case of developed countries, the speculation. We just want to enforce the laws related with speculation because we want to avoid to include practice of speculation inside the sector. Then it's important to say if one of more of these proposals are implemented, we are going to achieve a positive impact. But if we want to achieve the largest impact possible, we strongly recommend that all of them are applied.
Okay, now I'm going to explain what this second strategy is about. As Carlos mentioned, this is more like an innovative approach or strategy. Basically, this strategy seeks to create a more transformative change in the industry by creating an international environment where all these issues that we've been talking about are discussed and negotiated and agreed upon the solutions. Basically, up to now, the different stakeholders in the industry have been working in silos within different collaborative partnerships or models, and usually working on specific issues within the sector. The idea is that instead of incremental, fragmented changes, we can promote a partnership where all the stakeholders are involved in finding the solutions for the systemic issues that we have. The framework right now is there's an international trade framework. But we believe that these frameworks should change and should include some changes that improve these social aspects. So the idea would be to create an NGO coalition, which main role would be to start to promote a multi-stakeholder partnership and to initiate the engagement process. This NGO coalition will have to begin with what we call the positive responsible lobbying, which is basically a shift from the pressure, the actual model of NGOs pressuring multinational companies to promoting collaboration and dialogue. And this NGO coalition, like I said, will promote this multi-stakeholder partnership, will be composed by the NGO coalition and every stakeholder involved in the industry: suppliers, multinational companies, governments, and employees, representatives, or trade unions. Through this multi-stakeholder partnership, there would they would come up with a plan, what we call a plan. This plan would consist of a series of goals that they would have to be achievable, measurable, time-bound, realistic, and so they would have to cover at least these areas: living wage, minimum labor standards, grievances procedures, freedom of association, collective bargaining, transparency, and traceability. And finally, this plan would be then submitted to the WTO for implementation. This implementation could be either by reforming the actual agreement on trade and clothing within the WTO, existing already in the WTO, to a different agreement, or create a new agreement that includes these social goals. Why the WTO? Well, the WTO is the international institution that governs international trade, and this is a matter of international trade. And also because this would promote that the governments which have not been or have not taken much responsibility for these issues, this agreement would foster the role of the governments. So again, the idea is to create this transformative change, focusing in basically promoting a more global view of the problem, enhancing the role of the governments, and finally reaching this agreement with the specific goals. And now Amy is going to explain.
Okay, so on to our last proposal. And again, this proposal is focused on really looking at the incentive structures and the pressures that are within the system to try to figure out what types of systemic change can be made in order to really change the business as usual that we see today in the industry. So this strategy is focused on 4 different groups: governments, the multinational companies, the consumers, and the investors. And the first group that we looked at was governments. And among many different suggestions we gave, some of the ones that we think were important are trying to work to really eliminate corruption and conflict of interest problems within these countries, to promote transparency, and to really work to foster an active civil society, which we believe will promote accountability from the government to their citizens and really help build up the role of these governments to take on the responsibility of protecting labor conditions, which as today we've seen is being done mostly by companies and rather inefficiently. The next group is the companies, and one of the ideas that we wanted to highlight was really making sure that these companies include the social costs of production within the cost structures of their products. Right now, a lot of these social costs have been externalized from the cost structures, and we believe that these need to be brought in to the cost structures because, as Dov Charney, CEO of American Apparel, so eloquently says, it costs money to make things. $4.99 doesn't exist unless you're screwing someone. The next group is consumers, and we have several ideas for them as well, but one of the ones that we wanted to highlight today was the idea of really using their purchasing power to show companies what they want the future to look like. So if they are buying products from companies that are knowingly disregarding social issues within their supply chain, they're voting for that future, those actions to continue in the future. With their dollars, with their yens, with their euros, whatever, they're voting for that to continue. The next group is investors, and like the consumers, one of the biggest things we believe they need to do is show companies that they're not only interested in the economic performance of these groups, but also in the social responsibility of these companies. And Sean Ansett told us that one of the biggest problems right now is that in many of these companies, they have share traders rather than shareholders, and that the way that these companies are showing that they have success is by short-term goals and short-term profit, short-term sales, which really keeps these companies in functioning under the short-term vision of decision-making, and that is directly related to the economic model in which they function today.
In order to conclude our presentation, after all this effort, understanding the problems that has the industry, we have a final reflection that we want to share with you. That is, does the current economic model really promote social development and share value for all groups in the supply chain? Our response to this question is absolutely not. And this is why we propose a mind shift in order to create more value for all the stakeholders in the group. Thank you very much.
As you know, I love your approach. Most projects talk about the ideal, the realistic, everything else, but you really side, which is what are the key drivers right now? They're very cruel. They sound really horrible, but that's the way companies function. As you started from there, I'm very interested in the education of this new awareness. This is what you foster. I've seen all the proposals that you have, and it's really centered around the new mindset and education. Can you say something about this educating the different stakeholders going in a certain direction?
Is that okay? That's somebody specifically? Yeah, so the one of the big areas that we felt that education needs to be through is through, first of all, companies really changing their marketing strategies and their way that they're expressing their success to their investors. So in terms of marketing strategies, they can really work to not just say that buying new clothes is great and making sure that fast fashion continues, models like Zara or H&M, but really trying to show them the impacts that that has and kind of moving the industry towards, you know, ethically sourced clothing is cool. And then in terms of investors, really showing them that, making them understand that economic performance is not the only thing, and if we just go after that, we're really going to have to leave a lot of the social responsibility issues behind and try to figure out a way to kind of make a solution to fix that problem.
And also, well, in terms of consumers, like any big change would require time. There's also the education at schools and at home has a lot to do with it. The only thing is that obviously that kind of change we'll have to wait some time till we see some results. But this is something that actually we realize that consumers are going to behave the same way they're behaving, and if they're going to change, it's going to be slow. It's a slow change. That's for the education part. For the investors also, as Amy was saying, they should worry more about the social issues, but they should also understand that the long term always required to look not just to the economic side of the business, but also for the social and environmental performance. So.
And finally, adding like a practical approach, there are like initiatives already that helps or provide assistance if you want to change the way how you are consuming or buying things. And slow fashion is one of them. We included inside of final report because we believe that is promoting a change in the way how the people is perceiving, and also it's encouraging companies to try to transform their own operations in order to be more like sustainable in terms of the way how they're doing business.
The summary you sent us, you've got work cited here. Did you actually look at any company sustainability reports to find out what they say they're doing?
The works cited that we sent with the executive summary are just works that were cited within the executive summary. Okay. The full report has the rest. And we actually did a project for one of our classes on looking at social indicators, and we looked at 10 different companies and 10 different Nike, Puma, Adidas,
H&M, Louis Vuitton,
Timberland,
PVH, Timberland, Inditex, and probably this work that we did for the socially responsible investment class, it starts to like make us think that probably the current conditions that the multinationals or the tools that multinationals were applying to monitor the operations were not like achieving the level of expectations that are probably from the outside.
Because So you just mentioned SARA, and Inditex wasn't in the Bangladesh disaster. They have very strong systems in place, if you read their sustainability report. So I just feel a little bit, we're classing everyone as being bad guys, and I think the companies are actually doing an awful lot already to solve the problems. Accidents will happen, and Bangladesh was a serious accident, but up to what point can you hold a supplier responsible for that?
Just in response to that, our project really isn't based on Bangladesh. We kind of highlighted what was going on as we were doing the research, but we started the project before the accident happened, so it was really focused more on the industry in general, and we looked at all the different countries, and then we looked at reports by labor unions, reports by NGOs, and tried to figure out the whole picture of what was going on. But there are several disclaimers in our report about how not everybody works the same, not all governments work the same, but we tried to just get a basic global picture of what was going on. And some companies are doing more than others. Whether or not it comes across in their reports or other sides agree is debatable. But it is very true. It depends on the company.
Because do you, in your report, do you talk about, I think it's called industrial all? You talk about that, do you?
That's one of the, yeah, the thing is that we believe that there are some initiatives going on in the industry. The problem is that I think we all came to the conclusion that the economic model that is working is too strong to really, for those initiatives to really have an impact. It is true that in Bangladesh, like we were saying in our presentation, the conditions in general, it's a very poor country, the infrastructure is not good. Probably another fact that struck me a little bit, well, a lot actually, was that the garment industry is one of the best, if not the best industry in terms also of health and safety conditions. So if we can imagine how the other sectors can be, like where these people can end up working and with conditions, maybe agriculture, we don't know, maybe they don't have even a job. So it is true that the conditions are really bad, but we don't know, we're not sure to which extent that this economic model is going to help to shape the situation. And there are obviously initiatives, but like we said, there are initiatives where companies, multinationals, they don't agree, they don't come together. Like they do sometimes, but sometimes like the last one about Bangladesh, for some reason, for several reasons, the American companies, multinationals, didn't want to join the agreement. So there's always this problem with agreeing the whole sector.
Okay. I'd like to congratulate you for, I think, taking a very, very broad topic and raising some very important issues about it. And I think the challenge is how to extract something practical from such a broad and overwhelming topic. And I think you've made a very, very good effort in doing that. So well done for that. I'd particularly like to look at strategy 2. You've raised these 3 strategies, which I think are very well explained and put forward. And on strategy 2, I'm most interested in your choice of lobbying through an NGO coalition, the World Trade Organization, which is not exactly known for its transparency and accessibility. Many a lobbying group has had difficulties in trying to position things with the WTO. So I'd like to know, you've explained why you chose it. Did you look at alternatives? And as well as an NGO coalition, did you also think about other organizations? If you're looking at a multi-stakeholder focus, did you look at other possibilities? And I'm thinking of the media, international fora, business coalitions, that kind of thing. So strategy 2 particularly.
Okay, well, there was a discussion about this actually.
Lots of discussions about this.
And well, in the end, I convinced Amy and Carlos.
Kind of Daniel.
And Daniel, yeah. Well, Daniel, I don't know if Daniel is convinced yet. So, no, the idea. I personally thought of the WTO because it's true. It's there are many things that need to be improved in the WTO, the way it works, and that's the idea of creating this NGO coalition, which would be an international NGO coalition with all kind of NGOs. but with this approach of having a positive, responsible lobbying in their attitude. And it can be different sizes, like small sizes, local NGOs, or international NGOs. And they would have to come together to start a multi-stakeholder engagement. In that stakeholders mean everyone is invited. And international organizations, business organizations, all of them, they're invited. The idea is that, my view is that the World Trade Organization really works well for trade. And it really, promotes development the way they do it, and it works. So if we could change a little bit the way it works in terms of this social, I think it would be maybe a little bit faster to really save the situation. Obviously, the ILO could be another option. We thought of any other organizations, but in the end, I think I won.
Also, when he says it works, I think part of the thing that means is that there is some sort of monitoring, and if somebody's not complying with their portion of the deal, there is a process that can go through, whether or not that works completely well. But in terms of trade, they do have agreements, and the trade barriers and all that stuff do work in the sense that it is complied with in the most sense. And also we thought that it was a good idea to get the NGO to be positively, responsibly lobbying, to have everybody to come together and look at this as a systemic issue versus pressuring a company to do something better, which is what's mostly going on now. And so that was kind of the key area in terms of the NGO coalition, is to try to get them to say, guys, let's get together and let's look at all the issues together and figure out, if you do this, this is the consequence it's going to have, and then this other group's going to have to come in and fix that problem. So why don't we look at it all together and try to figure out some of the big issues. And also the idea was kind of, it comes from the UNFCCC where, although they haven't gotten that much across yet, it's really opened the dialogue and helped people look at all the different countries and look at what everybody can do. And a lot of times in the COP meetings, the groups come together on the side and really work on issues and have this. It just kind of opens the dialogue where we feel like that's one of the biggest issues that not that many people are speaking about everything together. And so that was kind of what we were hoping. And the WTO really helps bring the role of the government in. The governments are the ones that are going to have to say, okay, these are the goals that this multi-stakeholder group has decided. Now we have to negotiate on how it's going to get done, what types of mechanisms we're going to create. So if Bangladesh says, okay, I have to do this, but I'm going to need help from another country in terms of finance or capacity building or whatever, and create some sort of negotiation on how those goals can be met. So it really helps bolster the role of the government, which we feel like really needs to be done, because right now it's just privatization of what governments should be doing in this industry specifically.
That's fine. Thank you.